How did Remus become a werewolf? What actions lead someone to take revenge on a 5-year-old boy? Follow us along this magical Harry Potter what-if as we discover how Remus was cursed with lycanthropy due to the unthinking actions of his father. The report had quickly reached the wizarding world thanks to the Daily Prophet. 2 Muggle boys had been murdered, ripped apart by a monster. It was truly a horrible scene, one that sounded straight out of a story. All those who heard the news had to wonder who could do something so terrible, and why hadn't it been as simple as the killing curse? The Ministry of Magic was quick to act. With Voldemort on the rise and gaining followers, they were quick to launch an investigation in order to see if these deaths were related, or if it was a terrible accident, or even an animal that had attacked the children. Answers were needed, and the Ministry had little time to respond. After an intensive investigation, the Ministry brought in Fenrir Greyback before the Wizengamot, who had been spotted near the area shortly before the death of the boys. Mr. Greyback, can you please tell us what you were doing 2 nights ago? The minister questioned. Fenrir stood in the center of the room, almost missing the question as he gazed around. He was surrounded by so many people, and the means of how he had entered the grand place still stuck in the forefront of his mind. Things that shouldn't be possible, like magic. He paused for a moment, looking down at his feet. I apologize, it's a bit embarrassing. The 50 witches and wizards waited for him to continue. I've been a bit down on my luck lately. I had just been tossed from the pub, and I had nowhere to go for the night. I was on my way to St. Mary's when I heard the screaming. His voice began to shake lightly. I followed the noise, but by the time I got there, the boys were already gone. Fenrir took in a deep breath, trying to keep himself composed. There was so much blood. I tried to see if they could be saved, but I was too late. I yelled for help, but it was late. The only person that came was the mother. There were a few whispers amongst the council before the minister spoke. Thank you for your time, Mr. Greyback. You may... Minister, a voice stopped him mid-sentence. Fenrir Lupin, who specialized in non-human spiritus apparitions, was on his feet, gaining the attention of everyone on the Wizengamot. I do apologize for the interruption. However, I don't believe we should dismiss Mr. Greyback quite yet. Lyle kept his eyes on Fenrir as he spoke. Mr. Greyback was found with 3 others, one of which is a known werewolf that could easily explain what happened to these children. A werewolf, one member of the council scoffed. Greyback is not on the werewolf registry. A list that is ill-maintained and incomplete, Lyle pointed out. There are several things that lead me to believe that this man is also infected with lycanthropy. I think it's best that you stick to what you're good at, Lupin. Another member spoke. Look at this man. He looks as if he's been living on the streets for weeks, and we found no wand on him, so he's clearly not a wizard. There is a full moon tomorrow night. I suggest we keep him retained for 24 hours. If I'm wrong, we can obliviate him then. I do appreciate your caution, Lyle, but this seems entirely unnecessary. The minister shook his head. When will I be able to return home? Greyback questioned, a small smirk on his face as he looked towards Fenrir Lupin. I do have plans tomorrow night. I guess you can say I'm a night owl. Thank you for your time, Mr. Greyback. The minister gave him a soft nod before motioning to the person on his left. Mr. Sands will escort you back home. We're sorry to have wasted your time. Do werewolves really exist? Fenrir questioned as the ministry worker approached him. Werewolves are soulless evil and deserve nothing but death. Lupin scowled, staring down the man as he left the room with Sands. Upon exiting the courtroom, Fenrir was led through the corridors and towards the magical elevator that had brought him down to this floor. The ministry worker had been charged with escorting him out and then wiping his memory of the events that had happened at the ministry. Fenrir Greyback had other plans. Though losing his memories would not affect his life dramatically, he would still continue working for the Dark Lord and creating more werewolves, Greyback had specific plans for the man he had the pleasure of meeting in the courtroom, Lyle Lupin. Mr. Sands was a fair bit smaller than Greyback and rather thin. It only took a well-timed swing at the man that sent him to the ground and left him unmoving, unconscious. With his only escort out of the way, he was able to successfully maneuver his way up into the atrium of the ministry and leave undetected and with his memories fully intact. Greyback would return the generous favor to Lyle and show him how evil and soulless werewolves could really be. Lyle Lupin returned home that night rather annoyed, wondering how anyone in the ministry could allow that man to go free without even checking to see if he was a werewolf. And it would take less than a day to learn the truth. However, as the days continued on and he returned to his work with apparitions and the Department of Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, Fenrir Greyback became a distant memory that held no importance to him. The ministry was desperately trying to get a handle on anything that had to do with Voldemort, including the dark creatures that he was recruiting to his side, leaving Lyle busy at work. Lupin was also distracted at home. There was only a week left until his son turned 5, and his wife wanted to throw a celebration. Remus Lupin was growing up to be a fine young man. Lyle and his wife, Hope, could not be more proud of the boy. Though only 5 years old, the parents began to imagine how much Remus would continue to grow and what he would make of his life in the future. They wondered what he would be capable of and what he would take on for a career. All of their hopes and dreams for their only child seemed to expand each time they talked about it. It was late at night when the dreams turned into a nightmare, and a horrible scream came from Remus Lupin's room. Fenrir Greyback waited outside the house patiently. One room at a time, the blinds were drawn, and the home grew more still as the family readied for bed. The child had been asleep for hours, but it was only now that the parents readied themselves as well, the father preparing to wake up for another full day at work, while the mother wondered what she and her son would do on such a beautiful tomorrow. It was nearly time. The full moon was just moments away, and he couldn't wait outside the home any longer. Greyback moved himself to the back of the house, locating the specific window that he needed, with a small push and a crack as the wood moved under his weight. Fenrir Greyback was able to climb into the small bedroom, not even waking the occupant with the noise he had created. Though the boy did not remain asleep for long. As the full moon came into view in the sky, Fenrir Greyback's transformation began. Turning into a werewolf was a painful process. The bones cracked and stretched as they moved into their new positions. The face elongated, and sharp claws forced themselves in place of the nails. This was enough to wake the sleeping boy. Remus screamed upon the sight of the monster in his room. He didn't know what to do other than to hide and hope that his mom and dad would be in to rescue him. And even though a parent can move their fastest when they hear their child in need, Lyle couldn't move fast enough. Greyback, no longer in his own mind because of the transformation, ripped the blanket from the boy, his claws tearing the fabric to shreds, and without wasting a second, attacked the boy. The werewolf left a scratch running down the length of Remus's leg as he attempted to get away, only a moment before the creature successfully bit into the boy's shoulder. Remus screamed louder than anyone thought possible from a 4-year-old, ear-splitting and loud enough to catch the neighbor's attention, if the nearest neighbor wasn't nearly a half-mile away. Pain shot through his entire body, as if the bite and injected him with a poison that quickly traveled through the bloodstream. The door to the bedroom flung open, revealing Lyle Lupin with his wand in hand. Without wasting a second, the father quickly used stunning spells to chase the werewolf away. He casted spell after spell until the creature jumped back out of the window and ran off away from the house. Lyle felt a strange mix of fear and relief. He was able to save his son before the blasted creature could kill him. But he could see the bite on Remus's shoulder. He would be forced to live the rest of his life as a monster, a half-breed, losing control of himself once a month through no fault of his own. Though Lyle had to force down those fears and help his boy, werewolf wounds would not close on their own. and Remus would continue to bleed out if he didn't get any help. Hope and Lyle rushed their son to St. Mungo's Hospital, where the tension and the adrenaline that Lyle had incurred did not dissipate until the healer told him and his wife that his son would live. With a mixture of silver and dittany, the healer was able to seal the bite mark as well as the scratch that ran down the boy's leg. The scars would be permanent, and there was no way to get rid of a werewolf injury completely, but at least he was no longer bleeding. The family stayed at St. Mungo's longer than necessary. Even after the healer had allowed Remus to return home, Lyle insisted that they would not be leaving until they found a cure for Remus. However, no healer had an answer that he wanted to hear. There was nothing that could be done to help a werewolf. Each wizard held the same opinion as Lyle did. Werewolves were soulless and had no control over themselves. Werewolves were monsters. Lyle didn't give up at St. Mungo's. He began his own research and talked to any healer that would listen to him. Wrote wizards all across Great Britain. It wasn't until the next full moon that Lyle had realized that he had failed his son. There was no cure for Remus, there was nothing that could be done to help him with the transformation, and there was nothing that would help the boy keep his mind once he was a werewolf. Lyle and Hope had to figure out how they were to raise their son and keep him from hurting anyone. All of their hopes and dreams they had for their little boy, their only child, were now gone. Remus Lupin's entire world turned upside down. At such a young age, he didn't know what to do, and he couldn't look to his parents for help because all he saw was fear. The first month was in and out of different hospitals, his parents searching for anything that could help him. However, nothing worked. The first full moon was more painful and traumatizing than the attack the previous month. Despite only being 5 years old, this would be a memory that Remus would never lose. Remus didn't even know what was going to happen until it was too late. He was led down to the cellar by his father, surprised to find that the room was empty. Where his mother usually kept the dry goods for her cooking, it was all gone. "It's going to be okay, son." Lyle placed his hand on Remus's shoulder. "You'll be safe in here. Your mother and I will be right outside the door." "I want to sleep in my bed, Dad." Remus's voice was soft. "It's just for tonight, okay? It'll be tomorrow in no time, and Mom and I will make you an extra big breakfast." Lyle pressed a kiss to his son's forehead. Remus watched as his father hurried out of the small room, closing the door behind him. He could hear his father cast a spell. The 5-year-old didn't know what it meant, but it only made him more uneasy. He stepped towards the door when pain struck through his body. Like a jolt of lightning, it ran through each nerve and faded as quickly as it came. "Mom?" He tried to call for his mom, but there was no answer. The pain struck again, although this time it didn't go away. Remus screamed. It was the most painful thing he had ever felt, and he didn't know where it was coming from. He could hear the cracking of his bones as they shifted and stretched to his new form, though he didn't know what was causing the noise as he was so focused on the pain. His body began to move on its own as it changed and morphed. Remus scratched at his own body, looking for any way to stop the pain. His cries grew louder, begging for his parents in between the screams. It felt like it continued on for ages, even if it was less than 5 minutes. Remus was certain that it was never going to end. Until everything went black. When Remus woke the next morning, he felt as if he couldn't move. There wasn't a bit of his body that didn't hurt. There was a small puddle of blood on the floor beneath him, pooling from a deep cut that ran over his shoulder. Remus was covered in his own blood and the dirt of the cellar floor. He was cold and in pain. He wanted his mother. He wanted the suffering to end. The 5-year-old couldn't even bring himself to get up from the floor. He curled into a ball, tears streaming down his face. It was only a few moments later that the door opened, and his parents came rushing into the room. Hope quickly scooped up her son into her arms, pulling him close and trying to soothe his tears. His parents took Remus to St. Mungo's, needing assistance in closing the wound that Remus had given to himself. Remus's childhood was terrifying and lonely. It wasn't until the next full moon that he began to understand that this was an infliction that he could not get rid of. His mother tried to explain to him the nature of his condition. She told him how once a month he would turn into this creature and have no control over himself. Hope explained more than once that he was not a bad person, and this was not his fault. She told him how he had to be in the cellar for his transformation, so that he would minimize how much he would hurt himself and prevent him from hurting anyone else by mistake. As much as Remus was told that he wasn't dangerous and that he wasn't a bad person, his parents wouldn't allow him to play with the other children in the village. He spent the majority of his time inside with his mother. As he grew older, his parents had come to the realization that he would not be able to attend Hogwarts as his father had planned, and he certainly could not attend a Muggle school like his mother had. Lyle resigned himself to the fact that he would have to teach his son magic, and Hope would teach him the basics of the Muggle world. Remus slowly had better control as he transformed, not in the sense that he knew what he did in his werewolf form, but he grew accustomed to the pain. It was rare that he would wake up without an injury to himself, though, as he had nothing else to attack while transformed. His solitary world was looking to be forever. His father's search for anything that could help Remus continued to turn up empty. Remus sat on the floor of his living room, playing with the marble set that he had received for his birthday the previous year. His father had taught him how to play gobstones, but he had no friends to play with. There was a knock on the doorframe, catching the young boy's attention. A man in long green robes. His gray beard stretched down past his chest, and his hair was almost as long. "Hello, Remus," he smiled down at the boy. "Ah, gobstones. I haven't played that in quite some time. May I join you?" "Who are you?" Remus questioned, not moving from his spot. "Professor Albus Dumbledore. I'm an old friend of your father's. I am the headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry." The man came further into the room, taking a seat on the floor across from the boy. "My dad said that I can't go to Hogwarts." Remus looked back down at the marbles in front of him. "If it's all right with you, I'd like to play a round of gobstones. Do you know how to play?" Albus ignored the comment, motioning to the marbles. Remus nodded, a small smile on his face. Dumbledore allowed a few turns to take place before speaking again. "So, it's typical that when a young wizard turns 11, they receive their letter to Hogwarts. Monsters can't go to school. They could hurt someone." Remus's smile faded, turning his focus on the game in front of him, unable to meet the professor's gaze. "Monster? I don't see any monsters here." Albus spoke with a small smile. "Professor, I'm the monster." A tear slid down the boy's face. "Don't worry, dear boy." Dumbledore stopped him before he said it aloud. "I'm aware of what has happened to you, but Remus, you've never hurt anyone, have you?" "No, sir, because I stay away from people." Remus shook his head. "Well, as I see it, you're only dangerous once a month, and only if others are nearby, right?" "Yes, sir." "What if I told you that there was a way for you to attend Hogwarts, and during the full moon, you would have a safe place away from the other students where you could transform, and you would have no way of hurting people? Would you be interested in coming to Hogwarts?" Remus didn't answer right away, unsure if what he had just heard was the truth. "Could I really? I wouldn't hurt anyone?" "It would be perfectly safe, and you would have excellent care in the event that you did not feel well the day after." "Yes." Remus jumped to his feet. "I can start this next year, right?" Albus let out a soft yet deep laugh, rising to his own feet as well. "A werewolf is soulless, evil, and deserves nothing but death." Lyle's words in the ministry came back to bite him. He never imagined that his own son, a kind and gentle boy, would be infected with lycanthropy. Forced to change his view on werewolves, Lyle had to learn how safe one could be under the right circumstances, just as Remus had to adjust his entire life to his new condition. The magical world of Harry Potter is filled with many untold stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see what magical journey we take next.